Hello everybody, in this video I wanted to show how easy it is to set up a Steam configuration, even for a game like Star Wars Empire at War, which is really mouse and keyboard reliant. You can get away just using the mouse, but either way it's not meant for a controller. It's not designed to work on a controller, let alone the Steam controller. And I wanted to show first of all how easy it is to set it up and how straightforward it is, and then I wanted to show how well it works, because it actually, having set up a configuration and using it, yeah, I prefer it to the mouse and keyboard. And I put probably 300-400 hours into this game on mouse and keyboard, and I don't even know how long, because I played this, for many hours on a CD I had before I had it on Steam, and then I bought it on Steam, and then I've played it hundreds of hours in that. So I'd say probably, realistically, at least 400 hours, probably a lot more on mouse and keyboard, and then moving over to the Steam controller and having played it for, I don't know, maybe an hour and a half or so, I can say I've gotten used to this. I like it. I prefer it. It's very intuitive, and I think it works legitimately better. And it took about an hour to set up, so it's straightforward. It's easy. It is a little tedious. It is a little time consuming. Pretty much any game, though, you can find a community config if you don't want to be setting it up yourself. But if you like to have your own customized control scheme, or if none of the configs are what you really want it, you can set it up yourself, and it'll work really well. And then as well, I recommend the Steam controller because of the haptic pads, and they emulate the mouse really well in a game like this. They're very precise, and compared to using like an Xbox controller or a PS4 controller, this is, I think, going to be a lot easier to use. Especially for a game like this, these haptic pads are going to be a lot easier than the joysticks, and so I think the Steam controller, really is the way to go. And that's the point of this video. It's not really a tutorial on how to do this so much as a, just to say, if you haven't bought a Steam controller, you should. Even this far into the future, you should. It's very, very well worth it. So I'm going to show you my config. I'm going to show you how I have it set up. So I have 4 action sets, and I'm going to explain why that's sort of there and what they do in a second, but this is the default action set. So basically, your right trigger is your left mouse and your left trigger is your right mouse. So basically that means on your right trigger you're selecting units, and on your left trigger you're moving units. And then these bumpers just cycle units, which is something I wasn't going to add, but I had 2 buttons left over, so I added them in, right? The triggers on the back, or bumpers, whatever, they control scrolling. So because scrolling in the game is bound to the scroll wheel, when you use a button on the controller, even if you're holding it, only counts as 1 increment on the scroll wheel. So it only counts as if you moved it a little bit. So in order to get a full continuous scroll, you'd have to keep repeatedly clicking down on it, and that's really bad. So they have this option, hold the repeat turbo. And what that does is basically the controller does that for you, where it'll keep clicking down on itself as long as you're holding it, as it were, and then that will give you a smooth scroll. And I'm going to show that in game, and it works really well. So start menu is escape, so you can open and close the menu, the start button is that, and then the select button is space, so you can see your battle cam. And then I have gyro controls set up. I only set them up because I did a video a while ago recommending this controller, and apparently I forgot to talk about this, so I set it up. Basically, these are so simple as stuff. You just open up this part with the little symbol of like Saturn with 2 rings or whatever, very, very fancy basketball, whatever it is, an atom maybe, I don't know. But and all you do is you just pick your style of input, and then you put in your bindings. There's settings for you to to play around with. If you need to tweak something, you can open up a binding, hit select, and then you got your activator settings, and a lot of things you can tweak. I didn't have to tweak this a whole lot. I just changed the neutral angle, and that was it. And that kind of just controls like what angle you hold the controller at normally, right? A lot of what makes this config work is the use of radial menus. So how I have it set up is the radial menu on the left haptic pad. What it does is it lets you select your unit groups. So it's just a radial menu, button click, and then you just have these menu buttons which just go from 1 to 0, and that is how you select groups on the keyboard. So there's the rest of it. Now what's very, very, very cool and powerful is they have mode shifting. So if I hold Y, that's going to change with this haptic pad it does. So this is what happens if I hold Y. I get to do control and then the number to set my groups, because you set your groups by control and then the group number on the keyboard. So this is annoying to set up because you have to go into each of these individually. You have to toggle multi-button on, then you have to select them on the keyboard. It sucks. And then you have to type in the binding name so you actually know what the binding does. So it sucks to set that up, but it is easy. It's just very tedious. Now the thing is, I want it more than one alternative radial menu. You can only have one mode shifting button as far as I can tell. So the way around that is action sets. It's not 100% a perfect solution, and I would have rather probably more mode shifting buttons, because that would be a way to make this a lot better. So I did action sets. Now on the face buttons, basically when you press on them, you can choose them to bring you to a certain action set. So X brings you to movement, M brings you to multiplayer, and A to interface. And then so if I bring those up, basically they're the same, but the only real difference is in here you have your movement options, and then here's the rest of them. And then in multiplayer you have your multiplayer stuff. So, and that's the only difference. Everything else is the same. The only thing that changes is what radial menu I'm showing. And then obviously, in the default, to get the multiplayer you press B. So in multiplayer, if you press B, you go back to the default. It does work really well because there's a lot of controls in this game, and that lets you get all the ones that you're going to want on the controller. So the other thing I want to note very quickly is there is also action layers. Now action layers would not have worked for what I was trying to do, but could be very useful in other cases, especially because each action set can have its own set of action layers. So the only problem with action layers is anything you don't change from the default gets kept over. So I'll show you why that's a problem. In the default, in this radial menu, we have 10 options, right? We have 10 buttons filled. So in movement, for example, we have 8. See, we have 8, right? So what would happen would be 9 and 10, since they're set in the default, but we haven't set them in movement, they would just be what it is in the default, and there'd be no way to change that, which would mean 9 and 10 would still have you selecting groups 9 and 10, even though you're in movement options, and we don't want that. We want them blank. So for that reason, you would go with action sets in a case like this. So this is the controls in the game. Not all of them are listed, like setting groups, and the mouse controls aren't listed, but that's fairly basic. Some of these I left out, and that's kind of cool. One of your options is you can just, if you're like, I don't like this control, I don't ever want to use it, you just don't even set it, because a lot of these I don't even use on the mouse and keyboard, because there's way too much on mouse and keyboard to deal with, and if it's too much on mouse and keyboard, it's too much for a controller, right? Hands down. So like your select all, your select like, for example, you can use the right trigger to do that anyways, so I don't see a reason to have specific hotkeys. And then all of these ability hotkeys, you're just never going to remember them. They're too situational, they're too specific. Like why am I going to remember control plus X equals stimpack when there's only one unit that can use that, right? Just to me, this doesn't make sense on keyboard, let alone on controller. I never ever use these. I don't like these. I would never use them. I'm never going to remember them. It's not going to happen. And then some of these, like this tactical overview, you know what? Completely useless. There's no reason. I've never once used that. There's no reason. Somebody's like camera center and camera reset and even camera home, which I did map. It's useless. Like, you're never going to use that. So, unit preview, you never use. So, you do have that option to leave things out. Some of these I was going to add, but I forgot. Like quick load and quick save, I was going to add, but I forgot, and that shows you how important they are to me. But I'll show you the configuration in game very quickly. So, I'm using the left haptic pad to move my mouse, and the one thing I want to show is how precise it is, like how easy it is for me to select this. I know some games where they ported it over from a console and they just put your mouse on a thumbstick. It's not precise trying to get these menu elements. It's not very nice. But yeah, joystick moves the camera, very smooth, works very well. And then just left trigger to move my units. I can cycle them like that with my bumpers, even though I never do that. But I'll show you the radio menu. That's sort of the star of this. So if I want to set a group, just hold Y, set group 1, for example, deselect, and then without holding Y, set group 1. And what I really like about this interface option is you just put your finger on the haptic pad, no pressure, you just put your finger on it and it knows where your finger is, and that is fantastic because what that means is you can just move it around, and when you see the one you want in here, you just push down and you can just do that, and it works really, really well. Instead of having to like hold it down or something. Anyways, and so scrolling on the on those back bumpers, and that like it actually is more responsive, I find, than the mouse. Like changing between these sort of like I guess in the game is called tactical views. You know, it's still not great on these back bumpers, but it is better. You know, it is better. Anyways, back to the radio menus. Kind of got sidetracked there a little bit. You press X, you got these movement. They're just all these things here. You know, it's just like using the hotkeys for those. And then B, sort of your multiplayer stuff. Doesn't matter because we're not in multiplayer. A is your interface stuff. So the most exciting thing here is we can make the interface disappear, and that would be good for taking screenshots. So having your hotkey right there, that actually does help. I think that's pretty much all of the controls covered, except I want to talk about the gyro controls. So basically, I have it set up. You just tilt to zoom to change your zoom, and that's forward and backwards. And then also, if you tilt to your left and your right, you can cycle your units. So what's really cool about that is if I wanted to, that would save me 2 buttons on the controller, and that could come in very handy if I needed to put more inputs on here. I don't think I do. There's no real other inputs I'd want to put in. Maybe if there was a bombing hotkey, I'd probably bind that, and then the super weapon hotkey, which does exist, I'd probably bind those to the bumpers and get rid of unit shifting. But as it stands, there's not really any other inputs I'd want to use, but if there was, I could. So I hope that more or less shows you how easy it is to use this whole thing of setting up a config, and then how well the Steam controller works once you have it set up, or even if you pick a community configuration, if you find one you like. And then I hope if you haven't bought a Steam controller, this maybe gives you a reason you might want to. But that's going to be the end of the video. So until next time,